Now illegal for anyone under 21 to have a handgun in Jackson County, and illegal to sell a handgun to anyone under the age of 21 also.
This comes after Jackson County legislators voted today to override County Executive Frank White's veto. He argued it conflicts with state law and called it performative legislation.
There you go. Frank White was right. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. It is good to be here on KCMO 95.7 FM. As always, you can start your morning streaming us on the KCMO Talk Radio app. This is not a surprise. I mentioned yesterday that we will watch what happens at the Jackson County legislature. And here we are, the morning after, with the county legislature voting to override Frank White's veto. And now we do have an ordinance that technically is in place today. It is in place this morning. That says when it comes to carrying firearms, certain firearms in Jackson County, guess what? You are not going to be able to do that anymore. Well, I hope there is a sweeping stop and frisk that is happening right now as we speak all over Kansas City, Missouri, south of the river, of course, and in other parts of Jackson County. I hope that's what's going on right now, since this ordinance technically is law as of today. So KCTV5 talked to both sides of the political aisle on the legislature about this yesterday. Let's start with the Democrats. Manny Abarca, a legislator who pushed this ordinance, and hear what he had to say.
We wrote this knowing that we would be challenged, hoping for a court battle.
Abarca and some of his Democrat colleagues on the legislature welcome a challenge to the preemption law created by the Republican-dominated state legislature. That law prohibits local governments from enacting any firearms regulations that are more restrictive than state law.
We haven't been able to solve any issues revolving around violence or gun-related violence, and I think that it's time that county governments and local governments push back.
That's quite a statement from Jalen Anderson. We have not been able to stop violence. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding, because you're all a bunch of incompetent idiots who don't know where to begin, who spent the last 4 years doing everything woke you could possibly do, trashing police, not having any care in the world for taking care of bad guys, and then you wonder how we got to this place to begin with. Look in the freaking mirror for 2 minutes and you'll figure it out. I don't know what's going on. Everyone's shooting each other around here. I guess we'll blame the state. Okay, then tell me why that's not happening in other parts of Missouri. Why, in large part, that massive uptick in crime and homicides only seems to be happening in your backyard, despite the fact that the state of Missouri has the same gun laws all over the place. Don't tell me it's all about population density. Don't. Please. Go to the other side of state line then. Why is it different in Johnson versus Jackson? Why is it different in Eastern Jack versus Western Jackson County? Ask yourself that. Crime breeds crime. Criminals breed criminals. That's how this has always worked. And you guys have spent the last several years turning a blind eye to it. And now your answer is to have this dopey ordinance that will prohibit individuals under 21 from possessing handguns or ammunition and restricting those 20 and under from possessing assault weapons unless at sportsmanship activities. And this was based on a 7-2 vote by the Jackson County legislature yesterday. It also requires parental permission to loan, sell, or give a firearm to anyone 18 and younger. Frank White understood what was going on here. This is performative. That's all this is. It's performance for people who want to advance their political careers. They will get sued over this. There will be, unfortunately, your taxpayer dollars wasted on this. Attorneys at the county level will now have to also waste time on this, all because of politics. And I'm not sitting here and talking to you as someone who is like, the biggest sportsman in the whole world. I'm not. But I also don't like to be gaslit. I don't like to be lied to by people. I don't want people telling me, hey, we got a great ordinance, and now magically your community, your neighborhood is going to be a lot safer. These same people who are telling you this is must-have legislation don't like police. They were the same ones who were 4 years ago trashing cops in this town. Well, what are you going to do if you're going to have this new law prohibiting those under 21 from possessing a handgun and ammunition? How are you going to enforce that? Unless you have stop and frisk, which these people can't stand, which they don't like, which they think is racist, then what are you going to do? How are you going to stop a 20-year-old from having a handgun? Unless, of course, they use it in some illegal way. In which case, guess what? They've already broken the law, Jack. I'll do my Biden. Just throw a whisper and a Jack at the end of it and see how that goes. Jack.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you, John. But what are you going to do then? And by the time they've used it illegally, guess what? You've got laws on the books that you can hit them with. This thing makes absolutely no sense. But that does not stop the people from advocating for it and overriding Frank's veto on the Jackson County legislature, and that's why it passed 7-2 yesterday. It only needed to go 6-3 to override the veto, so they had one vote to spare, and as we expected, it did pass. So now it's going to be on the state. Now it's going to be on Attorney General Andrew Bailey, who did not get the job with Donald Trump as his attorney general, so it's time for him to get back to work in the state of Missouri. I almost would respect it if they weren't so hypocritical when it comes to law enforcement. But because they're so hypocritical on law enforcement, I have such little respect for this ordinance because there's nothing that they plan to actually do about it. Ask any cop in this town, or at least many cops in this town, if they feel like they're in the mood with this prosecutor to go about proactive policing. You think they're going to be stopping 20-year-olds, kids on street corners, trying to see if they've got handguns in their waist? You think they're really going to do that in this environment with things that have happened to their former colleagues like Eric DeValcanera? You think proactive policing is the place we're at in Kansas City? You think they feel like leadership in this town, in this county, has their back? You're kidding yourself. They don't trust these people as far as they can throw them, and they shouldn't trust these people as far as they could throw them. So once again, all the mess that's been created over the last several years, that's resulted in law enforcement being down 300 cops. That's resulted in massive mistrust in law enforcement in Kansas City, Missouri in particular, but around the entire county. And then the performance art that is put forth by these politicians who don't know their elbow from their you-know-what creates this kind of a situation that will do absolutely nothing for the safety of the people of Jackson County. But it will make the politicians feel good. It will allow some of these people to get themselves on television and on radio and stroke their ego and make them feel big time for a day. And ultimately, that's their goal. They're not working for you, as one of the local TV stations likes to say. They're working for themselves. They're working for their own political future. And the law, the state law, be damned. Your tax dollars, screw them. Because it's not about you. It's not about the safety of the people. It is ultimately about them. At 6:13 on a Tuesday morning on KCMO. Did I get my tirade Tuesday out of the way there? Did I just cross that off the list here at about 6:14? We do have Tirade Tuesday. It's coming up at 8:30 on KCMO. It's your chance to rant against whatever you want, but it's 2 hours and 15 minutes away. So I'm warning you. Usually I don't give you a 2 hour and 15-minute warning on it, but hey, I'm looking forward to a good one today. Coming up on 95.7 FM. Let's go to the other side of state line. What is happening at 117th and Knoll that could change the future of the entire Kansas City Metro? We'll get to it right here on KCMO. Nothing like a little downtown baseball. ... at 117th and Knoll. Oh, my goodness. Story here out of the Kansas City Star yesterday afternoon. Headlined, could the Royals move to Johnson County? What to know about former Sprint campus. It goes on to note here that there are almost 40 acres of largely undeveloped land that sit between the former Sprint headquarters and Town Center Plaza. And goes on to note that there is at least consideration there by the Kansas City Royals to look at that part of town. Now, this was something we talked a little bit about last week, but it looks like that location in particular is getting some more media attention. Properties located west of Leawood's Town Center Plaza. Of course, a shopping center with stores, 20-screen AMC theater, over a dozen restaurants. Directly north of the plot is the 29-acre Jewish Community Center campus. So you've got a lot going on in that area. I was actually at that. There's a First Watch over there that we were at before Kate and I went to the Broncos game a couple of weeks ago. So, and you know, we've all been to Town Center and done all that, and a lot of us, of course, know what's going on over in that part of town. But there still is some of that undeveloped land. You've got the former Sprint Center campus there, and Overland Park has shown a willingness to develop even when it's not in the best interests of people in that immediate area. Now, to be clear, I think this area is a really bad idea. I hate that I'm starting off the show with two things I don't agree with, but it's not hard to find things in the area these days that are just bad ideas by our politicians and our media and our big mouth talking heads, although I guess I'm one of those. But there's a lot of people who are just coming up with these ideas and they don't make any sense. Ask yourself how you're getting to a ballpark that's located at 119th and Knoll. Anybody outside of those may be going south, but even if you're going south, you're going to have to zigzag to get yourself over to 69 Highway. That's going to take you an hour in and of itself after a big game. And then if you're going north, you're going to have the whole place going up Knoll to get to 435.
The 69 Express should be done by then.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and I'll get on the express lane after it takes me an hour to get down 119th Street, John.
I don't know if I travel that way more than you guys, but see 150 when you go south on Knoll or anything like Antioch, that's already heavily congested as it is on a daily basis. So
yes.
You would have a lot of people doing that way, trying to make the run to 150 and then across one way or the other to Missouri.
That's a good point.
Kansas.
Yeah, but there's nothing going on 135th Street before you get to 150, right? I mean, I say that tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
There's plenty going on there. It's like
clear shot. Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
By the time you get your way down Knoll, you get to 135th, and then you start going east to get to 150.
Oh, it's 35 except for this one block area where it's 25.
Yeah, exactly right as well. Well, maybe what they really want you to do is you can stop at a restaurant, wait out the 2 hours of traffic, because that's how this works, right? In the minds of the owners. They all think that when a 3-hour baseball game ends, what we really want to do is not go home. It's amazing how, they think they can change behavior. As someone who has been going to sporting events my entire life, I've been fortunate to go to a lot of great ones as a kid with my old man. I'm now in a place where I love taking my girls. I'll go to games as well. I noted Kate and I went to that Broncos game 2 weeks ago for her birthday. We like doing stuff like that. I've enjoyed doing things like that my entire life. I might want to do something, go out to eat, get a drink before a game. Very rarely, unless the timing works out perfectly, am I dying to go eat afterwards. Now, I've done it, but I haven't done it the majority of the time. And you know what I've typically done when I've left Arrowhead? I've gotten as far away from the stadium as I can get before I go figure out what I want to eat. I've hit Gates on the way back. I've hit Joe's on the way back. But those are not within a stone's throw of the stadium. I want to get away from the stadium as quickly as possible. I want to get out of the congestion. I want to get out of the parking lot. And there's the thought that we can just change behavior. So now, as they talk about a baseball stadium, and there's more conversation around this spot at 117th and Knoll, Kansas City Star had a headline story on it yesterday. They ask the obvious question, would a Royal Stadium fit here? They write approximately 38 acres on the Asperia plot are undeveloped between Sprint Parkway, Knoll, 117th and 119th, according to Google Earth. It is unclear if a Royal Stadium would go there or take land from other property owners. The property owners did not respond to a request for comment on Monday. Kauffman Stadium's lot currently takes up 18.8 acres, according to the Kansas City Parcel Viewer. Plans for the rejected Crossroads Ballpark and Entertainment Complex called for 17.3 acres. While Kauffman Stadium has 26,000 parking spots, the Hesperia campus currently contains 12,500 spots that spread throughout 14 parking garages, in addition to parking in Town Center Plaza and other nearby developments. What about those of you who live in that part of town?
Oh, we're just going to eminent domain.
Yeah, well, we're just going to take land from people and
then
make
some new roads into the ballpark, so your neighborhood's going to have to go.
Yes. Your that little cul-de-sac that you got, nice quiet cul-de-sac. Well, we're just going to blast right through there. We need some parking and some ingress egress for the stadium they're going to build there. If you are someone who is, even if you're down the road a little bit, like let's say you're down Lionsgate area. I mean, you've got great neighborhoods, obviously, in that part of town. You got Blue Valley North High School right around the corner. If you live in this part of Overland Park, if you're at 127th and Knoll, you got beautiful neighborhoods, people who have put down roots, been there forever, new people coming in, spent a lot of money to live in that part of town. Do you want a baseball stadium a half mile away, if that? Do you want that kind of traffic? Do you want that kind of noise? Do you want that kind of congestion right outside your backyard? You tell me.
No, it's only 81 nights a week.
You're right. Yeah, only
81 nights a summer.
And odds are they probably won't make the playoffs. So, 81, what's the big deal? Get used to it. Now, the city will try to convince you that this is the greatest thing that could happen to you. It's so good for Overland Park. No, it's not. It's not. It will be an absolute, utter mess. And anybody who's got an ounce of common sense understands this. And I'm already looking at the text line here, and I'm hearing from a lot of you who are saying, hey, Pete, I live around there. I want no part of this. People in Deer Creek, places like that. Why would you want this? Why is this at all of interest to you? And how does this meet with John Sherman's plans from almost 2 years ago now, where he wrote a letter? I'm reading it from MLB.com, November of 22. Wherever we play baseball, we'll seek out efforts that result in real and measurable community impact, economic growth, enhanced quality of life, with an emphasis on historically underrepresented members of our community. How does 117th and Knoll fit those requirements? They don't. There's a potential cash grab thanks to the state, thanks to the awful star bonds that Republicans in the state legislature continue to promote. And then there's a willingness, I believe, unfortunately, at the city level to see if this makes sense. But whether or not it makes sense for the residents, the current taxpayers, well, that's mostly irrelevant to them. And that is the saddest part of all this. 913-4087-957. Feel free to tell me why I'm wrong. In the meantime, a teacher is suing over DEI locally. We'll tell you who and why next. You may remember this story from about a year and a half ago. A Shawnee Mission School District teacher made a splash after she wrote an op-ed critical of Shawnee Mission's diversity, equity, and inclusion training. This came, and she was on our show. Her name, Kadrin Sullivan. 15-year English teacher at Shawnee Mission North. You guys remember that conversation we had with her, John?
Vaguely.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking about it last night, and I thought, I remember talking to her. Mm-hmm. And I remember she was a little nervous on the air. That's what kind of stood out to me. But I understand it. She kind of did something that was certainly very taboo at the time. Now, I think there's an awakening going on this front. I think that the people have spoken in large part about the scam that is DEI in higher institutions, in corporate America, in politics. People are over it. They're not into it. They're done. So in many ways, she was ahead of her time, and we were ahead of our time here on KCMO.
Is it Jennifer Cadron Sullivan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So she wrote a piece for The Lion, which is a local online conservative-leaning publication. It got national media attention, and she claimed that the district's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are fostering a toxic environment in Shawnee Mission schools, and that white teachers and students are frequently being shamed for their skin color. So that was about a year and a half ago. Well, now she is suing the school district. That's right. This came down yesterday, and she is suing the district over gender ideology and diversity policies. She filed this suit in U.S. District Court of Kansas, alleging administrators' response to her outspoken opposition to gender ideology and anti-white ideology was an infringement of those rights. The suit is seeking unspecified damages, several injunctions claiming she suffered emotional distress and mental anguish, and that her career has been irreplaceably or irreparably damaged by the district's response. Administrators violated her rights by requiring her to use words, quote, endorsing and supporting the fiction that boys can become girls and girls can become boys, or that one can disavow his or her sex because one feels like it, according to the 102-page lawsuit. In addition to filing the lawsuit in late October, Sullivan also published an op-ed column on Fox News' website detailing her reasons for bringing the lawsuit. So, and that came out, I found it on Fox News. It came out and it was published November 6th, 2024 at 5 a.m. I'm not surprised I missed that. You may be wondering, November 6th, 5 a.m. Oh, that was the morning after the election. Yeah, sorry, I was not looking for op-eds from local teachers on the Fox News website the morning after the election. I was kind of making sure that when I woke up at about 4 a.m., that the Pennsylvania voters were still of sound mind, which they were. So I missed that when it came out on the Fox News website. What an awful time to try to drop a piece of news. I mean, I really appreciate what Cadron Sullivan's trying to do, but if I'm writing an op-ed to foxnews.com, and maybe she didn't have full control over this, but I'm not dropping it the morning after the election, nobody is going to read it. So now here we are almost 2 weeks later, and it's starting to get a little more attention. I saw that National Panhandler Radio here in town wrote about her lawsuit yesterday, and that what has brought this back to the forefront. So how the lawsuit ends up playing out, I don't know. But I know that there are plenty of people who work in our area school districts who don't like some of the woke nonsense that's happening. But a lot of them feel like they can't say anything about it. They can't do anything about it. When we did a watch party for the Trump-Harris debate with the Kansans for Life folks, a lady came up to me, and she works for one of the area school districts. And she told me that she will listen to the show on the way to the office and even sometimes at the office, but she will put in her earbuds and listen to us on the app because she does not want to be outed as somebody listening to this show while she is at work. It's amazing because if there were other talk shows or stations, either locally or around the country, that she wanted to listen to, she'd be fine. Nobody would say anything. But for some reason, this show, even though we are now in the majority when you look at the election results, right? We are still part of the counterculture movement in America, which is bizarre to me because we just proved that we're part of the majority 2 weeks ago today, John.
Well, I guess it means we shouldn't have coffee mugs for our show like everybody else. Huh?
I guess
People
not.
have to paint over them or something.
Well, I want to start a shop like Bill O'Reilly. Mm-hmm. You know, we start ripping on the woke and we start mugs and bumper stickers and everything
Bernie
else.
Would approve.
Yeah, I think so.
Sounds like a great idea, Pete.
Thank you very much for that, Bernie Sanders. I appreciate it. So I saw the story about Cadron Sullivan and how she feels like her speech has been infringed upon. And, you know, she's had emotional distress, physical distress. Her career maybe is stalled out in some respects. And all for speaking out against the DEI initiatives at Shawnee Mission. Well, this is what happens. Think about what happened to this guy, Seth Moulton. He's a representative from Massachusetts. And Seth Moulton came out after the election And he made a lot of sense. He came out and he said, listen, I think that when it comes to certain things in the Democratic Party, we've got to wake up here. I don't think that my daughters should be having to compete against biological males in sports. And what happened over the weekend? There was a Neighbors Against Hate rally in Salem, Massachusetts, right outside of his office. It's quite a coincidence that this was happening in Salem, Massachusetts. Basically a rally to burn the witch, in this case Seth Moulton, right there in the Salem courtyard. The man said something that is believed by the majority of people. And what happened? Well, the alphabet mafia came for him. And this guy, Seth Moulton, I believe is a common sense guy, which means he probably won't be around Congress much longer. But Seth Moulton is now happy to do the media rounds. I just saw him on Fox and Friends this morning. But then yesterday, he talked to CNN, and he said something very important about his own party. And I can appreciate a guy saying something like this where he clearly is willing to look in the mirror and figure out what needs to improve and what needs to be better on behalf of his own preferred political party. Here is Democratic Congressman from Massachusetts, Seth Moulton, talking to CNN.
What was the biggest mistake that needs to be corrected?
Well, obviously, we've lost touch with the majority of Americans. Democrats have a habit of preaching down to people and telling them that if they don't 100% agree with our orthodox view, often defined by the far left, then they're just bad people. They're morally wrong.
That is so well said. And he is exactly right. We've lost touch with the majority of Americans, says Seth Moulton, Democrat from Massachusetts. Democrats have a habit of preaching down to people and telling them that if they don't 100% agree with our orthodox view, often defined by the far left, key line there, then they're just bad people. They're morally wrong. That's how they ended up with the results of 2 weeks ago. But not enough people are willing to say what Seth Moulton is saying right there. And it's true. Anecdotally, I can tell you there are plenty of people I know in my life who have slowly moved to the right, largely because they realized that their friends on the far left basically disowned them if they didn't get in lockstep with all of their crazy ideas. And they're like, well, wait, hold on. There's more to it than what you're alleging. And they kind of got pushed to the right. And that's happening all over the country. So here's the thing. Is the party going to listen to guys like Seth Moulton, common sense guys, who are like, we can't be preachy. We can't talk down to people. We can't tell people they're morally wrong when they disagree with us. Or are we going to take the Sonny Hostin view response of, wow, America's so racist. America's so sexist. Oh, my gosh, the country. Oh, man, we're divided along racial lines. Look at us. Because that's the approach they have elected to take. And if the party embraces the view over guys like Seth Moulton, well, it will be good news for Republicans, and it will be bad news for Democrats. 913-408-7957. Happy Tuesday, 6:45. That rain worked its way through the metro yesterday, ending around what? Early evening, give or take. And we needed that rain, but man, it came in furious. This morning, it should be a very nice day.
That's okay. It's all dried out now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. My sump pump was running extra hard, though, last night. Thank goodness. Speaking of that approach, well, the View won't give it up, right? Is it the Seth Moulton approach or is it the View approach? Well, the View keeps calling you a racist and a misogynist and a sexist and everything else. 2 weeks after the fact, they are still going down that road, and I am here to drink the tears. I'll play it and get to you as well coming up on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. See, you do have some common sense. I like it. I want it on behalf of the country from Democrats like Seth Moulton, Jared Moskowitz, two guys who spoke to CNN yesterday, and they had this to say. The first clip is Seth Moulton out of Massachusetts. The second one is Jared Moskowitz.
What was the biggest mistake that needs to be corrected?
Well, obviously, we've lost touch with the majority of Americans. Democrats have a habit of preaching down to people and telling them that if they don't 100% agree with our orthodox view, often defined by the far left, then they're just bad people. They're morally wrong. And that's not going to win us any elections.
We have policy issues that are out of touch with the American people. Our tent's got to get bigger. We got to be more accepting of positions all across the spectrum without the shaming and the canceling that goes on our side of the aisle.
Without the shaming and the canceling that goes on our side of the aisle. Jared Moskowitz is a representative from Florida's 23rd Congressional District. So good on these guys. What they're saying is braver than anything you're told in mainstream media is brave to say. Right? We're told that bravery is getting in lockstep with the woke. We are told that LeBron James is a modern-day Jackie Robinson, which is comical. The amount of crap that Jackie Robinson took, the amount of shame, abuse that Jackie Robinson took, LeBron James is praised when he gets involved in politics. And, oh, yeah, he endorsed Kamala just like Taylor Swift, just like Beyonce, and how'd that go for him? Not well. But these guys are trying to save their own party, and I can respect that. They're trying to bring some sanity back to their own party. I can respect that. The problem is there are people with massive megaphones in their own party, like Sonny Hostin on The View, who 2 weeks after the fact continues to have no self-awareness, no ability to have any kind of introspective approach to what happened 2 weeks ago today, and instead is still sitting there every day talking to millions of Karens and saying that, don't worry, it's not you. America's still just racist and sexist.
As a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that we don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends. But it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And, you know, the facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at there's a clear racial divide in who voted for Trump as opposed to who voted for Kamala Harris.
Okay, so then she goes on to this graph that shows, yes, technically, more blacks obviously voted for Kamala Harris than whites voted for Kamala Harris. Whites voted for Trump. Blacks voted for Harris. The Hispanic vote obviously was close to 50-50. But what someone like Sonny Hostin continues to just deny, and does when she says, let's look at the facts, well, let's look at the facts. And the facts are that every demographic group shifted to the right, some by double digits. Hispanics by double digits. Black men by double digits. Now, do they still vote for Kamala Harris? Yes. But are they moving away from the Democratic Party? That is indisputable. Those are also facts. So instead of looking at this and saying, wow, you know, I've still got, let's say, the majority of black voters, ask yourself why things are trending away from your party, especially with younger voters. As the Democratic stranglehold on certain voters of color continue to go by the wayside in the wake of, you know, civil rights movement being 60 years ago now, ask yourself why that's happening. Instead of basically saying, well, whitey is racist, white males, forget it, you guys are the worst. I mean, we're just the bottom of the barrel when it comes to racism and sexism and misogyny and everything else. And ask yourself why people that you've relied on for decades in our elections are leaving you. You would think that that is the first thing you would do if you were actually interested in figuring out why you lost. And there are a couple of people who want to do that. But the big voices have zero interest in doing that. They want no part of it. They want to continue to finger point. They want to continue to blame. They want to continue to say, it's never us, it's you. You're the problem. And if you think that shaming Americans is the answer after what happened 2 weeks ago today, then you truly have lost touch with the majority of Americans, as Seth Moulton, Democrat from Massachusetts, said yesterday to CNN. If you want to continue the habit of preaching down to people and telling them that if you don't agree with them 100% of the time, well, guess what? You're morally wrong. You're a bad person. It's not going to work for you. You can try. I mean, you really can try. But I promise you, it's not going to create any kind of a Big Ten party. It's not going to bring people together who want to be a part of your movement. You will continue to push people away. We know people like this in our everyday lives. They're the worst. They're insufferable. And that's where the loudest voices are right now. And if they want to go down that road, I mean, I'll keep winning, baby. I'll keep the winning going strong. But for the sake of the country, it's really not in the best interest of the country to keep them going down this road. Bouncing around last night. Sometimes I need a little laugh. I'll watch Gutfeld before I call it a night at 9 o'clock. He's always good for a couple of chuckles. But I stumbled upon Dan Abrams last night on News Nation. And I'm watching Dan Abrams, and he's talking to this lady, Marnie Washington. She's been in the news lately because she is the person who worked for FEMA, who was a whistleblower who noted that they were explicitly told to avoid homes with Donald Trump signs as they were canvassing areas destroyed by the hurricanes earlier this fall. So Marnie Washington, she's done a lot of media, but she's on last night on News Nation. And she's, in a weird way, trying to... Well, I respect her being a whistleblower in all this. She's also trying to, in a weird way, justify the policy of FEMA. And she goes on with Dan Abrams last night, and because this is an explosive story, you've got a federal bureaucracy. And this is written. This is not like just her word. There is paperwork that shows that FEMA was telling some of its employees, at least some of its employees, to not go to homes for disaster relief that had Donald Trump signs outside of it. Yet the guy who just won the presidency, who got more votes across America than his opponent, not some fringe lunatic, way out there in left field or right field candidate, not some writing candidate, the guy who 76 million Americans went out and voted for 2 weeks ago today. You have a bureaucracy run by the federal government who was telling people in writing to avoid homes that had Donald Trump signs outside of it. And if you're in Kansas or Missouri, we should all be saying to ourselves right now, well, what if we have some disastrous tornado and FEMA's called in to help? This could easily be us, just because in this case it's Georgia and North Carolina. It could easily be us here in Kansas, Missouri. I mean, wildfires, flooding, tornadoes. I mean, we certainly have plenty of opportunity for situations where FEMA could be called in. So this could easily have been us here in this part of the world, John.
Could be. I'm an independent. That dang sign blew into my yard. Right? Now you're denied, sir.
Yes. Now, right? That could be you. That's right. Oh, man. Yeah, or if you're a Harris supporter and the Trump signs blow into your yard, then what do you do then? Then you're really SOL. So here's part of the interview from Marnie Washington, Dan Abrams, News Nation last night.
So to be clear, you are agreeing that there was a directive to skip certain homes with pro-Trump signs, correct?
Correct. And that's due to political hostile encounters. And unfortunately, when we run a community trend of what's happening in the field, we take in all levels of observation. It just so happened that, unfortunately, most of the hostile encounters, those running trends did have those campaign signs. Safety precautions are not politically driven, and that's what's being skewed here. Because can Ms. Criswell explain why didn't we canvass on Election Day or the day after? Why did we receive stand-down orders? Was that political or was that safety?
So she's going down the road of, well, this may have been driven by and motivated by safety and the experiences of those who are canvassing disaster areas. And she's laying the foundation for something that Marnie Washington, since fired FEMA employee, goes on to say, which is in a weird way justifying what FEMA did in avoiding, in some cases, homes with Donald Trump signs outside of it. And this is where it starts to get off the rails.
Well, let me ask you, because you compared it in a different interview to having loose dogs. And you basically said, someone on the team was comfortable with dogs, another person is not. We can't go to that home because of safety precautions. I mean, that makes sense to me, right? Where you have a specific incident that occurs at a house, right? If you go to a particular Trump-supporting home and the people were very aggressive, I get it. But taking that and effectively saying, well, we're not going to go then to any houses with dogs, or we're not going to go to any houses with a Trump sign, did you ever think to yourself, this sounds kind of insane?
It's not insane. My job is to make sure everyone feels comfortable and safe. I cannot project what's comfortable for me, for the entire team.
But why should the team get? But why should the team get to decide if they feel comfortable or not going to a particular home based on political support?
Based on their encounters, if they have valid reason to feel uncomfortable, and that's based on if you have ammunition signs outside your home of purple paint, if you approach with aggressive posturing, if you accuse us of government conspiracies and advocate strongly, they have the right to disengage.
Okay, so basically, if you watch The View, you might have brain rot that would suggest you would not want to go knock on a door of somebody who has a Donald Trump sign in their front yard. Got it. This whole thing of, well, based on lived experiences, if you're not comfortable walking into to a front door of somebody who has a Trump sign in their front yard, that's on you, and FEMA should not employ you. If you say part of the stipulation of me being employed and me canvassing disaster zones is I won't go to Trump houses, well, sorry, this job ain't for you. Go get a job in the real world. Go get a private sector gig. There's a thought, John, is it not?
Yep. Purple paint is a boundary marker, a no trespassing thing that people will put on fences, especially for hunters. So it kind of doesn't apply in emergency relief.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm going to be comfortable, period, during emergency relief, disaster relief, right? It's going to be muddy, might be rainy, might be wet. The whole comfort notion's ridiculous.
It is.
When you're volunteering.
Yep, exactly right. It's like, well, I'm not going to a home because, all right, if you're afraid of being attacked by a pit bull on someone's property, I can understand that. But picking and choosing what homes you're going to go to, if you're FEMA, based on yard signs that trigger you, heck, if I'm canvassing for FEMA, I don't want to go to a Harris house and be asked about my pronouns before I help them. What about that? That offends me greatly. You can ask me for my pronouns. Who do you think you are? Leave me alone. Like, where do you draw the line on how absurd that is? If you do not want to do the job, if you are triggered by yard signs and you're a FEMA employee and your job is to go canvass disaster zones to help people in need, fellow Americans in need, and you have that level of political bias, you're not up for the job. You can't do the job as it's being asked of you, in which case FEMA should not hire you. This is part of the bureaucratic bloat that when it comes to the Department of Government Efficiency that is being led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, I hope they take a sledgehammer, just the biggest sledgehammer you can find, to these bureaucracies that are bloated and need the ultimate shakeup. Okay, Dave Wasserman is with the Cook Political Report, and he just put together some data that he dropped last night, comparing counties with a Cracker Barrel to counties with a Whole Foods to see how they break down politically. So in 2024, this election this month, Donald Trump won 74% of counties with a Cracker Barrel and 22% of counties with a Whole Foods. However, Donald Trump is the first winner in over 3 decades to narrow the gap. 4 years ago, Trump only won 15% of counties with a Whole Foods and 69% of counties with a Cracker Barrel. So he improved his standing in both cases. He improved his standing in counties with a Whole Foods, and he improved his standing in counties with a Cracker Barrel. Now, one thing I can't figure out, and I reached out to Dave to try to get this information, what about those counties that have both, right? Like in Johnson County, we have Cracker Barrels and we have Whole Foods. But we know that Kamala Harris won Johnson County, Kansas. But the fact that it also shows you the difference between where the socioeconomic levels are at right now in both political parties. The Republican Party used to be that country club political party, and the Democratic Party was the working man, working woman party. This has now completely changed. The only demographics that shifted towards Kamala Harris were college-educated women and those making over $100,000 a year. And they moved slightly, not a lot, but slightly towards Kamala Harris from 4 years ago. Every other group that you look up, that you stack up, racial groups, Latinos, Hispanics, Jews, blacks, middle income workers, poor workers, they all moved to the right towards Donald Trump.
The rest of us couldn't afford it.
Well, I know. You couldn't afford that. That's what I've been saying forever, right? If you weren't impacted by inflation in large part and you didn't feel it, you could vote based on your emotions, based on your feelings, based on your yard signs that made you feel good in your virtue signaling group of friends. But for the rest of us, couldn't afford to vote for Kamala Harris, to John's point. Now, I know some of you are asking, I don't know how Casey's Pizza counties voted. I can't speak to that. I don't know how Red Lobster counties voted.
I'm not worth your Red Lobster money.
I don't know any of that. I don't have any insight on Red Lobster. I don't have any insight on Casey's. There's no point in doing McDonald's because every county has a McDonald's. So I'm
not worth your McDonald's money.
I wish I had more data for you on those restaurants.
Red Lobster counties are dwindling.
Yeah, that's true. There's only one left in the metro.
Like out in Cass County, the Casey's is right around the corner from Cracker Barrel there on 163rd and 71. So you've got one or both that may have the same stats. That's
yeah,
pretty close.
I think we're pretty safe in saying counties like Cass County that have the Casey's Pizza and the Cracker Barrel probably went a certain way. But I do not have any data beyond what I just shared with you. Now, speaking of data and polling, this just dropped this morning. This is not real news, but it just makes me laugh because Donald Trump has not even been inaugurated, and there are polling firms polling for the 2028 Dems. This is like after your team, like not that it'll happen to the Chiefs, but let's say the day after the Royals lose to the Yankees in the playoffs, the next day, who are we getting in the offseason? Who's the big free agent we're going after? Like, it's just a way to cope, right? It's a way to feel better about yourself. You start looking ahead instead of reminiscing on what just happened. We all do it as sports fans, and it happens in politics too. Echelon polling firm. New 2028 Democratic primary poll. Here's who they've got. Kamala Harris leads the way at 41% in this poll. Probably name ID as much as anything else. Then you got to go down to Gavin Newsom polling at 8%. Governor of California. Josh Shapiro at 6%. Pete Buttigieg at 6%. The transportation secretary, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. This is hilarious. Tiananmen Tim Walz also at 6%. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at 4%. The group that cracks me up the most is Tim Walz. Who the heck? I mean, even Tim Walz's family has got to be like, yeah, that guy wasn't a good pick. Who the heck in their right mind is coming out of the last 90 days saying, you know what we need? It's Tim. Tim Walz, that's who we need as our Democratic nominee. People are like, oh, why would you go back to Kamala Harris? Well, Republicans went back to Trump and he won. So I'm less bothered by the 41% of Kamala Harris than I am the 6% of people who thought Tim Walz is the next Democratic nominee and the guy you would want to be the next Democratic nominee. That one makes no sense.